fuck. It's big.
That's what she said.
Clair Obscur Expedition 33 is a heavily story-based experience, and I want to preserve as much of that experience as possible for you, so I'm going to be seriously limiting the footage and the characters that you'll see in this video. That being said, Clair Obscur Expedition 33, in my mind at least, is one for the ages. Very rarely does a game come along that's not only surprising in its quality, its depth of gameplay, but consistently rewards your curiosity in the world and its characters, whilst delivering an incredibly unique and emotional story that, despite some rough edges, I absolutely loved. Let me know any questions you have about the game in the comments down below, and we'll start with performance as we often do for reviews. Now, performance is actually one of my main concerns for Expedition 33. The game runs fine on my RTX 4090 with a fair few FPS drops in the highly detailed areas, but its combat overall is solid, which is definitely important for the real-time elements. But you never know how Unreal Engine 5 games are going to perform, so your mileage may vary here, especially on console. Definitely check those reviews for performances if you do want to make sure it runs good for you. Graphically though, it's just absolutely stunning. Like, great use of particle effects and vistas. The world map is absolutely beautiful to wander around in with that pulled back perspective, and then when you do delve into these areas, there is just such a diverse range of environments.
Tomorrow comes.
All those different environments are just from the first act, by the way. There are many more unique areas to explore on foot, which is where you'll do most of your exploration. Areas are typically like a linear path with some divergences here and there to find resources and pick those, more on that in the progression section, along with some jumping puzzles and unmarked side quests, which is a little annoying. There are multiple of these side quests or tasks that NPCs will ask you to do, but they are all completely unmarked. You're not missing much by not doing them, but it would be nice if there was some like basic tracking of these other than just, simply me writing them down. Speaking of that side content, in the early to mid game, it's basically impossible to clear some of the side areas and like side optional bosses because there isn't a clear level system between how strong enemies are. Often you'll arrive at these areas and just get completely stomped by these unwinnable encounters because enemies just do too much damage, or they will attack you 27 times before you even get a chance to think about your own attack. But you can return to these areas freely in the future and complete these challenges, which does give you that little element of reward because you do clearly feel that progression that you are going on with this journey and the party. There are also some jumping puzzles and like platforming bits that are a little bit annoying because the movement here isn't like 100% built for that sort of like platforming element. You feel kind of heavy and cumbersome all the time, but the rewards for these are often just like outfits or hairstyles for one of the party members, so it's not like you're missing out on much. Again, they're just optional things that you can experience. Like that main progression path that you'll go on focuses on the core elements of this experience and the gameplay loop, and that's what is the best parts about Clair Obscur Expedition 33. It's just those additional like sprinkles on top that the game has that you can choose to engage in if you want to. The other half of the world is the world map, where the perspective is pulled out all the way and you explore this like stylized version of the game world. You will unlock SKA that can run and swim and later fly you around the map that will progressively unlock more areas for you to explore on this map. They contain the jumping puzzles that we just touched on, some collectible areas with like music rewards, lost gestrels that you can collect and bring back to your camp, and optional bosses and combat encounters as well. There is like a fun, whimsy vibe around SK and exploring with him as he sort of talks and jumps around with the nice animations. And there's just a great feeling to these moments and exploring the world that you kind of get lost in that experience a little bit. The music as well just really adds to that core exploration loop. The main story here will take you about 30 hours, and Sandfall believes there's about another 30 hours of side content to do, which I haven't done all of yet myself, but I do kind of believe them because there is a lot of side content that becomes available to you once SK can fly. There is also a New Game Plus that unlocks after you finish the main story if you're still not satisfied. I had this epiphany whilst playing Expedition 33. I was really trying to find like a game to compare this to, and obviously there's the Persona and the JRPG vibes with the music and the turn-based combat, etc. But one night I was sipping my gin and tonic and having some chocky, and it kind of hit me that this game is a little bit of like a modern day Lord of the Rings, The Third Age. Now, The Third Age was a turn-based RPG set like parallel to the events of The Lord of the Rings, where you follow the Fellowship with your own like Fellowship adjacent party along these sort of small, mostly linear, beautiful environments and fight creatures and these massive boss battles along the way. And that same feeling and that same rhythm that I felt back then, which is one of my favorite like RPGs of all time, by the way, you should go and play it, is that same feeling that I get here. The exploration and the world elements in Expedition 33 aren't necessarily going to be that massive journey of exploration you would experience in an open world game. Typically, they're much smaller in scope. That can be finding those collectibles and little moments. There are also a lot of optional cinematic scenes that you can get as well, which are sort of a reward on its own because of the quality of the voice acting and the writing, even the direction in some of these cutscenes as well. But I really appreciate that this game's exploration and like open world and world map elements are really only there if you want to engage with them. You don't have to. You can follow that linear path, but then if you want to delve deeper into the experience, there is just so much more content and lore and things to learn about this game. And that's only one of the reasons why I really love Expedition 33. So in my preview, I talked about how the combat system is basically Persona's combat system with like the ranged weapons and then skills instead of personas and then a basic attack. But it really uses these systems as a baseline. And then as you advance through the game, it adds to these base elements with things like gradient attacks, which are kind of like an ultimate, as well as like the real-time elements, the quick time events, and being able to dodge and parry and jump and like the gradient block that you get later on. All of this adds additional depth to what you would expect from those systems, while in a subtle way improving on some criticisms and issues that Persona's combat system actually has. Now, these real-time elements, we'll start with that, are in some regards the best part of the combat system, because when you have a turn-based combat system, even from the days back when, I was a kid playing Pokemon for literally hours on end, when you make an action, you sort of take a break and wait for your next turn to like input a command to do that next action. Like, you go and grab a drink, look at your phone, whatever it may be. Here, you're constantly engaged in that combat system because you have to dodge and parry and jump and gradient block and do all this stuff. And even when you do your attack, you've got quick time events to add additional effects to those attacks. Or say if a heal is going to hit one target, if you perfect the quick time events, it'll hit all three, for example, and heal all your entire party. Now, this is the best parts about the combat system because it is consistently engaging across the game because it adds these additional elements. You only start with the dodge and parry, then you get the jump, and then later on you get the gradient attack. And then as the additional party members come in, the combat system is constantly getting deeper and more complex as your understanding of the system gets, like, you sort of feel like you've learned everything there is to learn, and then it keeps adding these additional elements. And then on top of that, these bosses and these harder encounters will have these massive attack chains where you've got to use the dodge and the parry, the jump and the gradient all together to really coalesce into this really fantastic push and pull. And almost, I know they've related it to Sekiro because of like the blocking and stuff, and it kind of is a little bit like that, but it really is its own thing, and it's just engaging in its own way. I will say though, the lack of a pause button in combat is hugely frustrating, especially when bosses and large enemy groups have like these long strings of attacks and you have to avoid the damage, or just the fight is over because the damage will just wipe your party. I would really love a pause button here because some of us can't sit at our desk entirely through these encounters. We just need to briefly pause to go and do something. I also think these elements are, in some regards, where Sandfall are getting high on their own supply a little bit, in both a good way and a bad way, right? The bad way, as some enemies have these massive string of attacks where you need to parry twice and then jump and then counterattack and then parry 3 more times and then a gradient finisher which one-shots you if you miss it. It's fun and engaging for sure, but at some point you almost need to encounter some of these late game bosses first die to them multiple times to learn their attack patterns and how their combos actually work, and then try and actually beat them for real, that you know what those animations are and you can properly time your dodges and parries and everything. Dropping the difficulty down to the story mode does make this a little bit easier because you don't have to dodge and parry everything. You can take a few hits. And on top of that, I would have really loved like a little pop-up window that says if my dodge, parry, etc. was late or if it was early, because regularly I'm adamant that I hit the button at the right time and it just doesn't actually parry and I take that damage. That feedback loop just needs a little bit of tweaking because it's not very gratifying when the enemies do the same attack you've seen 25 times and you feel like you've hit that parry at just the right time like you did on those previous times and it doesn't actually parry. I would just like just a little pop-up that just says I was late or I was early or something, just that little bit of extra feedback so I know where I'm going wrong. But that doesn't take away from how great the combat is. One of the ways that this system differs from Persona as well is that there is no mana system here that you would get in the dungeons in Persona. Instead, you've got these action points or AP which replenish every combat encounter, which allows for more synergy between your party members, like using Lune to burn a target, and then Mael can then use a skill to enter her virtuose stance, which increases her damage by 200% when attacking an enemy that is burnt. Then you can use like a high AP attack to maximize her damage output on the next turn. Because you're not resource managing in the same way you would in a like Persona game or typical JRPGs, you can freely dump all of your best attacks in every encounter without really having like a lingering consequence for that. And because of that, it's more engaging to test out these different synergies, these higher cost spells and skills, and seeing how they interact, because every encounter you can use them freely. You're not limited to just say basic attacking or free aiming every fight like you typically would in say Persona dungeons or those larger, mana-based JRPGs. Before we talk about progression, I do just want to touch on the bosses, especially the main story bosses here. Like, God, like they're just pure adrenaline, and like the cinematic direction is just on another level. Like the camera in these moments is basically like you're playing a cutscene. The camera will zoom around, play around with the aesthetic and what you're doing, as well as have these massive moments where these enemies will have these giant cinematic attacks and you've got to parry at the right time, and it's just extremely rewarding to get those timings right and fighting those encounters, especially how they then relate to the story element. These encounters often have a matching music track that elevates the story moment that you're currently in, as well as the dialogue that happens in these moments. It's just extremely rewarding and enjoyable to fight these massive encounters, and they feel as epic as they should, which is something that turn-based games sometimes struggle with, as everyone just kind of stands around and waits for their turn. It doesn't really happen here, and I just really appreciate the cinematic direction in these large-scale moments. So as you level up, you'll gain an attribute point to spend in vitality, which is basically like your health, your might, which will increase your attack. Agility will increase your speed and sometimes a little bit of attack and defense. And then defense increases your defense, and luck increases your crit chance. Now, on top of that, you've also got the weapon that you have currently equipped, which has a very Souls-like scaling to it, as it will scale to 2 of these stats, and that scaling will then affect how much attack power it actually does, along with gaining skill points to purchase new skills for each party member, each with their own skills and unique mechanics. Gustav, for example, you'll charge your arm by parrying and dodging and hitting enemies, and then you'll dump those charges for increased damage. Mael has a stance system where each stance gives you various buffs, and then Lune uses elemental stains for different effects on her other attacks that she uses. I'll let you discover the other mechanics for the rest of the party on your own, which I am intentionally not telling you too much about because I think you should learn about them for yourself. But what this all leads to for each of the party members is not only having their own role in combat, but finding those synergies between each member, and their attacks are really satisfying in their own way. And it's further exemplified by the Pictos system, which are basically just materia from Final Fantasy. You can equip 3 at a time for passive buffs to your health, your defense, speed, etc. But the main benefit is the tangible effect that it does have, like adding an additional attack or buffs to your basic attack, or gaining action points when performing certain actions in combat. Again, there are synergies to be found here for each of the party members and their like specific party mechanics as you balance what Pictos you equipped and where, and also why. You create builds for each of the party members, and on top of that you can equip additional Pictos beyond the equipped 3 with like Lumina and just get that passive effect. So there's a bit of like a balance, almost risk reward system to deciding where you're going to invest the additional Lumina points you have to make sure you've got the right passive effects active for certain party members that then synergize. Using Mael as an example here again, she is fantastic with burning damage, as a lot of her skills do fire and burning damage, but they also gain benefits for attacking enemies that are burning. So you want to make sure that you're using Pictos that add additional effects to her basic attack or her skills, or when she attacks burning targets, she gets health back. Things like that is the way that you want to like develop her kit. There are other ways to take all these characters, as for the most part it seems like there's sort of 2 to 3 different like build varieties for each one, but I do appreciate that there is a lot of hidden depth with all of these systems that you can actually get a lot out of, and I may actually do build videos for them. But we still haven't talked about the best part of this game.
Let them spend their final year in peace. This is your only warning.
I don't think I've ever had tears in my eyes during an opening prologue of a game. Sandfall do an incredible job of setting up this world's conflict as the paintress each year paints a new number, one less than the year before, and those of that age all immediately die, or what's called the gommage here. As you watch the number go down from 34 to 33 in those opening moments of the game, you see the struggle that this world faces, and also how important these expeditions are, and the journey that Gustave, Mael, Lune, and the other characters are about to embark on at this basically futile effort to try and stop the paintress, and why they've chosen to spend their last year of life on this futile effort. This is all emphasized by incredible voice acting, which in some regards you'd expect from a cast that features the Daredevil himself, Matt Murdock, or freaking Gollum, Andy Serkis as well, but it's actually a lot of the other voices that carry this experience, not just Ben Starr and Jennifer English, who give some of their best performances here, but also all the main cast. I did actually really appreciate Rich Kimball, who plays Minoko here. There's a fantastic back and forth with Minoko and Ben Starr's character that plays almost like a Gandalf, like a wise old man role for these group of characters. The music though is like just the best soundtrack of the year so far, at least. Like, just go and listen to some of the tracks on Spotify or wherever you can get them. They've already released some of them. I've actually been listening to the Spotify playlist a little bit myself, and you'll get an understanding of how beautiful these tracks are on their own. But what you need to experience for yourself is playing the game and seeing how they're expertly woven into each scene that they're present, including some boss-specific music that's just unbelievably good. Music is always there to get a feeling or a certain emotional response out of, you know, the viewer, the gamer, whatever it is in the moments that it's there. It's so expertly done in Expedition 33 when you have these amazing, unique music beats that hit when you're just about to start in these really intense combat encounters, or even in those really emotional segments, and also the way they remix that core soundtrack. Like, there's a couple of tracks that you'll hear very regularly throughout the game, but they change with the characters along the journey and are then woven back into the scenes, as it gives you some nostalgia of events that happened before, but it's a little bit different now. It's just very well done. So I've said the story is well acted, the music is great, but the journey the expeditioners go on here, multiple twists, turns, tears, you've honestly got no idea what's actually going on in this world, and that mystery and the hook will pull you through the entire game. I also appreciate that Sandfall's side content that's available to you from the most part, like once you hit Act 3, will expand on the game's world and lore if you want it, but it's optional. If you just say want the core experience out of this game without diving deep into the lore of this world and understanding these characters to the nth degree, you can just go and finish the journey and you'll get a good good experience out of it. But if you want more, there is absolutely more that you can go and get. And I want to know what's going on and understand it all, see it all, do it all. Granted, they make some choices in the core narrative that will definitely test you. There's some really gut-wrenching moments, but pushing through those and seeing the end is absolutely well worth your time.
Bonjour, mes amis.
Hey, bonjour mon ami.
If you've just skipped to this part of the video, I see you in those watch time analytics. You can't hide from me. Go and watch the rest of the video, because when I tell you that Clair Obscur Expedition 33 is one of the best gaming releases this year, in my opinion, you kind of need to understand why. And that can be hard to get that message across by just watching some B-roll here at the end. And Clair Obscur Expedition 33 is a game where every single element, the characters, the music, the combat, the story, the depth of the progression, all play off each other and coalesce into something truly special that I highly recommend you play. Obviously, it's on Game Pass, so you can have a go at it there and play it immediately. But otherwise, whether you like JRPGs or Western RPGs, any kind of RPG that I've covered on this channel, you should experience this game for yourself. I haven't spoken to other reviewers, so I don't know if I'm just unreasonably high on this game. So obviously you should check other multiple reviews, because maybe I am just, you know, smoking something crazy. But this is really an incredible experience. But if you have any questions about the game, put them in the comments down below and I'll get back to you after my birthday. I'm taking a couple of days off for my birthday, which is the day that this game comes out. But thank you guys for watching this video till the end. Thank you to our members for supporting the channel. My name is NorZZa, and I hope you have a great day.